I'm still trying to come to grips with how things shook down on Saturday because Aston Villa did not play well in that second half, and Chelsea absolutely did. We gave them a couple of chances to win that game late, which they didn't take, and we had a couple of chances to get a third goal as well. And so there was this sort of feeling of slight unfulfillment to a degree, but that kind of frittered away a little bit on Sunday when Arsenal went to Spurs and won. So now we're almost into magic number time. The combination of Aston Villa points gained versus Tottenham Hotspur points lost. Let's dissect Aston Villa 2, Chelsea 2. After the Bournemouth game, a lot of people latched on to their manager Andoni Iraola's comments about why Villa was so successful this season, why it seemed they had energy during difficult fixture congestion periods in the season, and that was because of our style and the fact that we rest in possession. That is an old coaching buzz phrase, by the way, and if you've watched this show long enough, you'll have heard me use it over and over again. Emi Martinez spends more seconds on the ball than any other player in the Premier League, and this is our way, and this is why Villa players were not lying on the ground in Lille begging to be subbed off the way some Manchester City players were last week. The problem with Saturday is that the reverse is also true. When you don't have the football, and in Aston Villa's case, it was dramatic. 71 to 29% possession in favor of Chelsea. So now you're spending what amounts to almost 64 minutes out of the 90 chasing, shifting from side to side, mentally occupied. You have to be impeccable without the football, and then when it finally does appear at your feet, guess what? You're not sharp because you haven't seen enough of it in the game. Welcome officially to the Holy Trinity show, where it is my mission to identify the three key issues or moments that defined Villa 2, Chelsea 2. And both of our regular video correspondents were in action on what was a coolish day in Birmingham, I understand. Alex Dutton and his magical guitar shredding fingers were capturing the goods both outside and inside Villa Park, as was Samir Gaby in another one of those spectacular Henson retro revivals from Division Retro. And Samir actually sacrificed his bollocks to get spectacular footage of the player's arrival via coach. This has become a thing over the last couple of games, and I'm sure it won't be the last time this year either. Now, as far as the key numbers are concerned, this again was as wide as we have seen this season. These stats say to me, we were so far off of it, and yet we got something out of it. But what was so obvious throughout this game was how the ball just kept going back to Chelsea. Ground duels won is the one stat that really pops out to me. And like I said earlier, you've got 29% of the football. When you get it back, it's really hard to keep it. And that's what made this a very edgy watch for me. Really exciting issue from this week, and it's a big picture thing, but we got to hear from three of the most important people at the football club. Wes Edens, via a sound bite, was talking about the club from a very macro perspective. We heard from Chris Heck on some of the activities that he was working on in his area of expertise, and we got to hear from Unai Emery at length upon the activation of his contract extension. And what you'll find very interesting about Emery and Heck is that they never, ever talk about the other person's silo. Chris Heck doesn't talk about footballing matters, and Unai Emery doesn't bring up commercial activities, even though Chris Heck being successful helps Unai Emery build a better squad, and Unai Emery's success helps the commercial applications. And why this is exciting is because our club is now set up properly. Two experts who have autonomy in running their individual silos within the club. They report directly to the two owners. And that is so good and so healthy. And in the past, there have been individuals in the club who really wanted to be involved in footballing decisions despite not having any acumen in footballing decisions, or commercial ones for that matter. Unai Emery's focus on all his post-match media was not centered around letting a 2-goal lead slip. It was all the positives that his team has achieved a year on from a lot of positives. Qualification for Europa League, for example. He talked about how good Chelsea was, which is a fair comment, and just how happy he was with his team. And you'll notice Unai Emery is extremely diligent and consistent with all of his messaging, and that is strategic on his part. Very, very clever. On the other side, you had Mauricio Pochettino spending the entire time complaining about the decision that wiped out the 2-3 goal, which is ludicrous because that is a foul. There is no debate on that. The only grievance he can have, and I agree with this part, is that Craig Pawson required a VAR review to come to that conclusion when he was standing 7 yards away from the incident. Compare Unai Emery's post-Chelsea comments with those of Jurgen Klopp after the West Ham draw, which probably sees them eliminated from a legitimate title hunt this season. I mean, Jurgen Klopp was the Premier League's media darling, engaging, funny, transparent. Well, now, all of a sudden, when he realizes that the season ending is not going to be a fairy tale story like the one he imagined when he, in my opinion, prematurely announced his departure, again, making it all about me and not the club, only he will know why he decided to do it at that time, but it's a major strategic error in retrospect. And by the way, he spent the entirety of that Everton game barking at, yelling at, and complaining to the fourth official, which drives everybody nuts. He does it all the time. Unai Emery barely speaks to the fourth official. And again, we should be only so lucky to have this guy in charge of our club. And maybe most importantly of all, Unai Emery never uses fixture congestion, fatigue, load, injuries as an excuse, ever. And he really could have this season, by the way. So there's a no excuse culture, and guess what? The players have bought into that. And I have to say, the reason we are here looking at the situation that we're in right now is all because of one person, and that is Nassif Sawiris. And I'm sure Wes Edens would have had some input, but Sawiris said himself publicly, "I hate to lose." And Dean Smith told me, you know what? Nassif is the one who is a little more emotional of the two and goes and makes things happen. Well, he was sick of the managerial merry-go-round, and he took action, and he pushed the boat out for Unai Emery. And I don't know who he consulted with to arrive on Unai. I bet you Suso was one of them. But he would have had some help, and he would have arrived on this guy after talking to him and said, "You can have the keys to the kingdom. You can be our Sir Alex and Arsene Wenger, and we'll give you everything you need." And that is brilliant leadership. And great leadership, it starts at the very, very top, not just in the middle, or near the top, at the very top. And the reason why we are here today in this situation and why the future looks so good is because of our owners.
Hi, I'm Darren Woolley, and you're watching the Holy Trinity Go.
Big issues and certainly cause for concern, but the two injuries we suffered in this game, and Yuri Tielemans looked a very unhappy character as he hobbled off with what looked like, and I'm not a doctor, but it really did look like a groin issue. And maybe one of the reasons why he was so concerned and unhappy was because of the Euros imminent this summer. And obviously he'll want to be involved in the Europa Conference League semi-final starting on Thursday, but the last thing we needed was another injury, especially in that part of the field, and especially because he's been so darn good of late. And then Emi Martinez coming off at halftime was not really a surprise to me, given how hard the physio team was working his hamstring in that phase in the first half. And isn't it kind of coincidental because, Martinez is not playing the first leg on Thursday. And so these 45 minutes would have been hugely valuable for Robin Olsen. Plus, it gives Martinez at least a full week of recovery heading into possibly the Brighton game or the second leg in Greece. And it was not just the prudent thing to do, but I do wonder a little bit at 2-0 up at halftime, was this strategic somehow? Big moment, huge moment, could have easily been the number one moment from this match. The save Robin Olsen makes on Cole Palmer, because the match went this way, then it went this way, and suddenly then, late, it goes down this pathway through the forest and arrives at Cole Palmer, one of the hottest goal scorers in the Premier League, one-on-one in close range with Robin Olsen to win the game. And what does our big Swedish goalkeeper do? He spread eagles and pulls one out of the Emi Martinez book to send it wide for a corner. If that goes in, oh my goodness, the scenes. And what happened prior to that was rather untidy. Diego Carlos on as a substitute. I don't know where the communication was. Should it have just been headed backwards? I don't know. But I don't understand this noisy faction of Villa socials giving pelters to Robin Olsen. Like, do we honestly believe that Emi Martinez would have made the saves, the 2 goals that went past him? I don't think so. Big moments. The 2 chances that fell Ollie Watkins' way to either extend Villa's lead or give them the 3-2 lead. Now, forgive me for sounding like Captain Obvious here, but if you're Maurizio Pochettino, you are going to tell your team that one of the keys to this game will be to deny one of the league's best goal scorers the ball. Starve Ollie Watkins of the ball, especially if you're coming off a 5-0 hammering at Arsenal. And lo and behold, Chelsea fulfilled their manager's wishes because Ollie Watkins only had 19 touches in that game. That is the lowest of any player that played the full 90 minutes. And like the rest of his team, when the ball finally does arrive at your feet after being starved of it so much, you just don't have the same feel for it as you would when you have the majority of possession like we did last week. Earlier in that first half, he kind of snatched at one from the left channel of the penalty box where, if he had a look across, he did have a teammate coming on the blind side, and it would have been a great ball to play across goal. Can't blame him too much there. And you certainly can't blame him for the one that the goalkeeper spilled, and he just couldn't quite get around on it. He just wasn't in the right place. If that ball goes either side by a foot or a yard, it's 3 there. The late chance that comes to him via a very nicely cut back ball from Matty Cash was a really good chance, and I don't know how it can't be considered a big chance when you look at where Ollie Watkins is in the penalty area. But unfortunately, this ball comes to him when he's had 17 touches of the football in the game. And so you can't really blame him for scooping it, getting under it, and not getting the contact right here. And I believe if he did get the contact right, he would have at least tested the goalkeeper, and who knows, maybe there would have been some crumbs spilled. And I do wonder, with strikers who are so goal hungry, and this 20 number is looming, as is a potential Golden Boot award, is that starting to enter his mind? Not because of the potential bonuses that are probably written into his contract for those milestones, but simply because I think he wants to prove people wrong. Big moment, obviously, our early goal. And there's a saying in football that sometimes, did we score too early? This was very passive defending by Chelsea, and it was a very untidy goal for many reasons, but because they were coming off the back of that 5-0 thumping at Arsenal, you can't blame Villa fans for thinking, how many, how much? So the response by both teams to that goal was going to be very interesting. And credit to Chelsea, they picked themselves up, dusted themselves off, and actually created the better chances over the next half an hour or so, and they had more of the ball. You could also ask, well, why didn't Villa adopt a sharks smelling blood in the water posture and really go after it and put them under? Well, we didn't, partially because they wouldn't let us. big moment, the 2-2 goal, and you ask 10 people about what the biggest moment in this game was, you'll get probably 10 different answers because there are so many possibilities, and obviously the equalizing goal would have been high on that list, but this was a perfect example of passive defending. If you want the definition of backing off a shooter, you've got it right here. Big Tim Iroegbunam is too slow to close him down. Then again, John McGinn is in the neighborhood as well, and he too stands off so far. I don't know whose responsibility Conor Gallagher was in that situation, but neither of them reacted quickly enough and urgently enough. We should all want Iroegbunam to be a highly successful player and a regular somewhere. I just do not see that being with us in the short term. And I trust Unai Emery's eyeballs fully with players like Big Tim and Cameron Archer, who he moved on and now we're getting back, apparently, even if it's just for the short term, and Philogene Bedace. Who are we to question the technical staff anymore when they say, you know, Big Morgan Rogers at 21 has the tools, has the progression, and has the higher ceiling to help us right now, whereas these other guys, we're going to either move on or loan out. Who are we to question that anymore? Big moments in this game. The Nicholas Jackson chances. The first one required VAR intervention, and at first glance, it did look like he was going to be offside right away, and so we chalk that one off. But the second one reminded me of his FA Cup goal against us here, and this worrisome trend we've had this year of allowing goals from crosses. I mean, he is wide open in the heart of the penalty area. There's nobody challenging him, and he heads it onto the post. His own manager will say, Nicholas, you absolutely, positively have got to score there on the money you're on. And isn't it ironic that his lack of ruthlessness came against his former Villarreal manager? And I have to say, based on this game and several others that I've seen throughout the season, I am very thankful that our club did not seek to reunite those two. I got a very funny message from Jude McCarthy on X. He's known as Sad Villain on that platform. He says, call 24/7 services. The Morgan Rogers goal has blown the roof off of the Holt end. And I love the fact that me peppering you with 24/7 has infiltrated your subconscious, and now you equate roofing with 24/7 services, and that is one of their core services, of course. And whether that's an industrial type job like a train station roof where a windstorm rips it right off, or it's a simple residential skylight leak, doesn't matter. Your roof is your shield. If you don't get that right, the damage it could cause below would be more than the cost of replacing a roof, potentially. And Paul Hansaker and his team take great pride in buttoning it up properly the first time. Oh, and they had the Holt end roof repaired by second half kickoff. Big moment number 3, the Rogers rip. Did I not say on the last show how meaningful this game was going to be between two of its combatants, Cole Palmer and Morgan Rogers, and they shared a cheeky little laugh just prior to kickoff, and it would have been very meaningful for the two of them to be squaring off in a game like this. But once that whistle blew, you could tell neither of the two combatants wanted to come out on the short end of this score. And so when Morgan Rogers doubled Villa's advantage in the last 5 minutes of the first half, it really did appear as though he was going to have the last laugh. This finish is so instinctive, and we've seen it a couple of times with Big Morgs this year, that he is capable of watching two things at once while on the ball. One is the little gaps on either side of the goalkeeper, and the other is where the defender is, to use that defender perhaps as a screen, as we saw in the 2-0 goal against Brentford early in that second half. Well, here he does a couple of really interesting things. First of all, he looks off the goalkeeper. He looks to his right to freeze the goalkeeper. And then when the defender comes across and just opens up his legs in order to try to block any shot attempt, with a little bit of backswing, Rogers feathers it. he threads the needle into that bottom corner. I mean, this is a goal scorer's goal. And apparently it's been eons since we've had a Villa player in his first year with us score 3 consecutive goals at Villa Park. And so I guess in the best mate battle, when you think about that goal and the fact that Cole Palmer was denied late by Robin Olsen and the fact that we're sitting in a Champions League position right now, you have to give the best mate derby to Morgan Rogers in 2024. Big moment number 2, the 2-1 goal. This is the goal we needed to avoid conceding for as long as possible, because the longer we held off conceding it, the less time Chelsea might have had to get an equalizer. And also, you know, coming off the FA Cup semi-final and the loss at Arsenal, they're starting to wonder, are we ever going to score again? And you put that thought in their mind if you just hang on that little bit longer. And straight from the top of the cliche cupboard, yes, the 2-0 lead is one of the trickiest to defend in sport. But this goal shone a light on a couple of things. First of all, Chelsea's understanding of how to correctly press us, and they did it very effectively for the second time this season at Villa Park. And in my opinion, it also shone just a little light on maybe a slight dip in form in Douglas Luiz right now. I said, you know, after the Arsenal and the Bournemouth games where both John McGinn and Youri Tielemans together were so good and so effective, it was going to be hard on them to break that up and reintroduce Douglas Luiz. John McGinn has proven many times this year that he's very handy as a 10, and he proved it in this game with the 1-0 goal. And of course, when Youri Tielemans, who prefers to be a number 8, I think had to come off, well, then McGinn dropping and Moussa Diaby playing behind Watkins, that too was a straightforward and logical switch, or so we thought. The problem was Moussa Diaby had such a terrible time trying to retain the football. He wasn't alone. But when we had no outball and it just kept coming back to Chelsea time and time again, we simply couldn't cope with that. And to their credit, Chelsea, a precocious young team, yearning for some consistency, a very volatile and inconsistent squad, they had us with their press again. Luca Dean had probably the toughest assignment on the park that day, and that was facing Noni Madueke 1v1 on so many occasions, and Madueke was probably the man of the match. So when he played, Luca Dean, an infield square ball to Douglas Luiz as 3 blue shirts were descending on him, it began a chain reaction of problems. And after the ball went in the net, Douglas Luiz did have a look over at Luca Dean as if to say, I really could have done without having that ball played to me while 3 blue shirts were bearing down on me. And here's also where Emi Martinez being substituted at halftime. I mean, Emi Martinez would have been happy to have received a back pass from Douglas Luiz right then and there, even if he had to thump it away in anger. But maybe there was just that slight moment of hesitation or indecision, and from there, it was over. I just have this feeling that we are not going to suddenly abandon our way, that we're going to continue to play out from the back under extreme pressure at times and in tight spaces. I know a lot of people would have looked at Luca Dean there and said, why don't you just hump it long and then reset, get back into shape? But I just don't think that Unai Emery is going to change his ways. And you know what? I agree with him. That repetition, that training will make us better in the long run. Then we just have to be tidier. And as much as Douglas Luiz has significantly contributed to our success this season and over the past few seasons, he has to be stronger and more decisive quickly in the situation he found himself in there. And that situation in isolation makes me think that our number 1 recruitment priority this offseason is a physically imposing and high volume, maybe even defensive-oriented central midfielder.
I'm watching the whole Trinity show.
And the number 1 big issue that defined Villa 2, Chelsea 2, the 2-0 mentality. First half was weird. We were probably lucky to come out of it leading 2-0, and Morgan Rogers scored a great goal, at which point I thought, well, this this has gone extremely well considering the circumstances, but ever since the beginning of the second half, I have to admit, thoughts of Brentford were racing through my mind because from the moment the second half kicked off, I did not feel comfortable about the way this game was going. Now, the last time we faced Chelsea at Villa Park in the FA Cup, they did us in transition over and over, especially thanks to the aforementioned Madueke. But they have pace and they have power, they have young legs, and all three of their goals came from transitional moments, including the free kick, which led to the 3-1 goal. So how did we adjust to that game? Well, we decided this time to not allow transitions by just dropping into a mid and sometimes low block and saying, Chelsea, come and break us down. And you know, for the better part of an hour, that seemed to work, and I have no qualms with that whatsoever, especially because when we broke, it did feel as though we were the more likely team to get that next goal because of maybe a moment of inspiration from Leon Bailey or an overlapping run from one of our fullbacks. But as the time went on and we didn't get that third, and we began to tire, and Douglas Luiz on a yellow card started making some dodgy challenges, it felt more and more like concession of at least a goal was inevitable. And so we come full circle and go all the way back around to what I said at the very beginning, that resting in possession is an excellent way to go for this football club until your possession totals only about 29%, which means you're now spending 71% of the game chasing the ball around all over the park. And in the cold light of day, Chelsea is a very good football club with really expensive and high potential players, and they're very inconsistent. The downswings is Arsenal, the upswings, the FA Cup semi-final, and the game on Saturday. And I believe if Poch is given time, he's going to turn that group into a really good group. I just don't know if I trust Todd Boehly to make the right decisions on behalf of that football club. So I look at the game on Saturday as a monstrous point gained under the circumstances, and I hope that perhaps it's another reference point for our technical staff, including Monchi, to become a little bit more crystallized about the exact type of player we need to recruit for those occasions where we're sitting in a mid-block and trying to protect a lead. One more Premier League game left at Villa Park against a Liverpool side that I think is ripe for the picking right now. Watkins will have to wait for number 20. We did get a VAR decision in our favor, but it should have never come to that. The offside one I don't count because offside is offside. And once again, we see goals in the first and last 5 minutes of the first half, but our inability to add the critical third and then concede two in the second is a bit of a theme, as the numbers show. Rare also that we score first, but don't take all 3 points. Up next, Olympiacos in the Europa Conference League semi-final first leg Thursday night at Villa Park, a side coached by Jose Luis Mendilibar, who will be very familiar to both Monchi and Unai Emery because prior to moving to Greece, he was at Sevilla, and before that he was at Eibar in La Liga, so they'll all be familiar with one another. What terrifies me about this opponent is that they feature a bona fide Villa killer in former Wolves midfielder Daniel Podence. How many times did Podence do us, particularly at Villa Park? Now, Olympiacos will be without a couple of key players, including centre-back Ntoy, who was sent off very late in the quarterfinal second leg. And of course, we won't have Emi Martinez in this game either, but I sense opportunity. If there's one thing I hope we learned from the quarterfinals is that you really have to be extremely good on your home ground, especially when it's the first leg, and that you could actually win the entire tie in that first leg at home if you are really on it and you put the opponents under and you are tidy defensively. Conversely, you could also lose the tie in that first leg if you are sloppy defensively. Diane Russell, our exquisite Villa Park tour guide when we were over, said that she was actually touring a lot of Olympiacos fans around this past week and that they are not very confident going into the semifinals, which I could sort of understand given the recent experiences of that club in this competition. So I think it's absolutely incumbent upon Aston Villa to take the approach of put them under early, often, but be extremely diligent defensively. And so we couldn't pull off the double against Chelsea for the first time since 1990 and the first time in the Premier League era, even though it did feel, even as far as the hour mark, like it still could have been a possibility. I thought that third goal was coming somehow, some way. But like I've said numerous times on this show, the more times you take 4 points from an opponent in a Premier League campaign, the higher up the table you'll sit. And so, despite all these odd feelings after the game, like irritation a little bit, perhaps unfulfillment is a good word, a little bit of worry with the injuries, there was an enormous sense of relief in the point earned, and that felt a whole lot better on Sunday too after the North London derby. Until Thursday, be well and buckle up for just another wild and crazy week in Aston Villa land. And of course, and as always, up the mighty Villa.